shall we say, through the middle of your...
Yeah, nobody cares about yours, Richard.
Call a meeting to order.
Oh, please. Too late.
Yeah.
Are there any additions to the agenda?
Yes, Sunday construction.
Sunday construction. Anybody else?
Nope.
Oh, yes, I have some.
Too late.
Okay. I'll do it tonight.
Whatever. What would you like?
I want to talk about business owners and a meeting. I would like to further what we were talking about at the town hall meeting.
It's all already underway, but we can...
Thank you very much.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
First item are minutes of the council committee meeting held Monday, October 2nd. The recommendation is to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is a delegation from Mr. Robert Shore of 3409 Harper Road regarding construction activities in the northeast. Ask Mr. Shore to come up.
Mayor, councillors, and staff, I'm Robert Shore, and my family and I have lived next door to the water reservoir site on Harper Road since 1997. If you could please put the picture of the crane up while I speak. We've been neighbors to the city in more ways than just proximity. Over the years, especially when we were the sole neighbor, we several times reported suspicious activity at the site. Moreover, during the construction of the pump station, I personally repositioned road markers which were inadvertently knocked down or even improperly placed. Moreover, I even 3 or 4 times put a manhole cover over its manhole, and if the markers weren't covering, certainly a vehicle could have had a very bad accident. Moreover, when rebel rousers blew up a truck on what is now known as the Morningstar property, if you look in that picture just to the east, this side of the mountains in the background, that's where Morningstar has their Partington Creek development. There were some vandals up there. They blew up a truck. The next morning, my dog woke me up, and I looked out the washroom, and lo and behold, I saw headlights on the property. So I got dressed really quick, went outside, and went down and investigated, was able to spot the vehicle. As they came to the corner, they came by the light there. I positioned myself so I could get the license plate numbers and reported that to the police, and they subsequently made an arrest. 2 years ago, I reported an unsafe situation at City Hall to the mayor. There was a lighting issue, and the mayor acted promptly, reported it to staff and police, and it was handled efficiently. What I'm saying is I am the type of person that takes my role as a resident of British Columbia and Coquitlam very seriously. I am here before you because I wish to protect my family. Next door to us, as you can see on the picture, is a crane. It's more than 65 feet high, 20 meters. It extends 115 feet horizontally. It is intimidating, to say the least. For more than 5 years, as I sat on the Smiling Creek community plan, I've been aware that there would be an expansion. Supposedly it would have been back in 2007. I've been in touch with the city regarding this on numerous occasions, yet I was only given 2 business days notice of the start of the project to build this reservoir. Moreover, they didn't spell out the fact that there would be a crane there and that this crane would trespass on my property. At first, I was concerned with the construction, not realizing that the crane was going to be there, possibly causing damage, and I worked with Rick Thibault, and we got resolution there and satisfaction. With the crane, however, I was left basically to negotiate with the contractor. I initially voiced my complaints with the city, and I asked for a bridge to be erected to safeguard my house. I thought this was a reasonable request since this crane reaches 24 feet past my property line. That's more than half the width of some of those lots on the Morningstar property. And in fact, 3 feet over onto my house. This monster weighs over 33 tons, that's 66,000 pounds, and being over 65 feet high, probably more like 70 feet high, it is very much a concern. And of course, what more concerns me than anything is we have these high winds that come in November. To give you some background information, on July the 10th, I received an email from Rick Tabo which stated, "The jib crane will not be allowed to encroach on your property," I quote. After, I guess he went on vacation, there were people who weren't around from the city, but after numerous passes by the contractor, I guess he didn't get the message. And several phone calls and emails were made by me both to the city and to, I guess in Rick's absence, I had spoke to Chad Braley, and I copied people such as Bill Sussick and Gerald Townsend regarding to complain about the trespass. I did not get resolution, but for 15 days on July the 25th, when I received the second email from Rick that the city has instructed the contractor, G&E, not to encroach on your property. That trespass of the crane stopped from that point, and they started moving the crane in the opposite direction. I'm not sure why they didn't get the message the first time. I was quite disappointed about that. And I didn't raise an issue until September of 29th, when I sent an email. I was really concerned because the crane had weather vaned across my property and was sitting right over my house. It was the 29th of September. We had winds of excess of 100 kilometers per hour, and with the bells clanking, that's a sure sign that something could be imminent. It's to say intimidating, that does not give it, it leaves you fearful. Now, granted, a crane collapsing doesn't happen every day, although maybe it does happen every day. I went on the internet and I found it was replete with examples of cranes that have collapsed. But why did the crane have to be so high? Why did the crane have to have such a long jib? This construction, Morningstar wasn't using their site. This crane could have been positioned into another location altogether. Now, after I had sent the email, I finally got a response. I think it's 12 days later on October the 10th from Gerald Townsend. Rick apparently was unavailable, indicating that the target date for dismantling had changed from October the 4th to November 15th. My fear is that if the contractor hardly worked during the best and driest days of August and September, and that's why they got behind on schedule. My wife made note several times to me that they hadn't been working there, why would they complete this by October or November the 15th? So it's a grave concern. Now the crane is still overhead. We have the highest windy season of the fall, and how are they going to safeguard my home and the people who live in my house? Some might say this is not trespassing, but they are wrong. The law, though it's vague on points in use of a crane, there is one point that's clear. The area above a person's home which he can normally use is not to be trespassed. I have trees in excess of 100 feet on my property, and if they were there on that side of the property, then they would block this crane. I believe this crane should be either shortened or taken down or repositioned so that it does not trespass and could not trespass on my property. Other events that have happened, if you could click to the next picture, please. There's been a manhole, even though there is no development permit at 1503 Coast Meridian Road, a manhole installed. Next picture, please. They left debris in the ditch there, and is there one more picture like that? No, this is subsequent. I think the mayor and Brent have seen some of these photos, but this, again, there's a story behind this.
It's about a year.
No, it's in February, March. The story is that when Morningstar acquired the property on 3429 Harper Road, they rerouted the stream, which actually should be going through the city's property. The city, you know, if you applied fair rules, the city wouldn't be allowed to build a reservoir there under SPIA rules, because that creek goes into the city's property. There's actually two creeks that go into the city's property, one of them which was rerouted. But that's not my argument. My argument was when I went to investigate, now my wife has some information there. When I went to investigate the staking and tagging of my trees on my own personal property to find out if the city was doing it, and I got this collection right here. And nobody at the city seemed to know, but there was all kinds of people around me that I checked into where my storm drain was, where, you know, I built my house in 1997, 16 years ago. Well, they filled in the ditch on Harper Road, and they told me that when BFW moved the ditch on the east side of Harper Road to on the 3429 side of Harper Road to the north, that for compensation they were filling in the ditch in front of me. When I went to inquire where my drain was, because it drained into the ditch, like the city's property drained into the ditch, I figured that they must have installed it into a storm sewer. I was advised that they didn't, and that it would cost me $2,000 to hook up to this storm sewer, when in fact, you know, my pipe went right out into the ditch, and BFW, who was doing the development, should have done that. So that's some of the incursions that I have experienced. Again, the marking of the trees, and getting back to my original point, the removal of the crane during windy season. I did not ask for this hazard and risk. You know, if at the very beginning they said, yeah, you're right, Mr. Shore, we'll build that bridge, but I would have even let him put loads over my property. I wouldn't care, as long as it was, if I had some protection from that. But I didn't receive any insurance policy. There's nothing to protect me in the event of catastrophe. All I can do is sue. Do cranes collapse? Of course they collapse. And in fact, if you were to look at this crane, you would find that while it's being operated, there's never an operator inside. In fact, there's a guy with a Nintendo box down on the ground, and sometimes he isn't even watching the crane move. I witnessed this. He's got his back to the crane as the crane is being moved. So does that make it scary? That's very scary. You know, perhaps Coquitlam has to look at a policy on cranes, especially in residential areas, but I leave it to you. If this crane does fall on my home, then you can remember that I looked you straight in the eye and you guys didn't do anything about it. Thank you.
Okay, I thank you very much. We do try to be a good neighbor as a city, and we have, of course, in this case, contracted to somebody to build that. That's not our crane, it's a contractor's crane. So council probably won't be able to speak to a whole bunch of this. We may have some questions for you, but you've used the word trespass, which puts it into a legal sort of setting, and I don't want that. I want simply for us to have a dialogue about how to solve this. and I think we should be able to solve this. I've asked staff to put up, just for council's perspective, because we took a tour, and it was independent of anything to do with your property. It was just a tour of a number of projects, and we'll start with one. Okay, we'll have to start with that one. So that's the scale of the reservoir construction right now. That's his house, and that's his house behind, right?
Yes.
And then the next one, actually, these were just photos that were taken. It shows the length of the crane. Obviously, it has to reach across the entire project, but that means that on the backswing, but only particularly on wind, when it's a wind vane.
Right.
The workers' compensation rules and lots of other rules say you have to let it flow freely so that when the wind comes up, it relaxes against or with the wind. So I recognize that an easterly wind would make it relax over your house. So now we're faced with that challenge. The other issues, I'm going to ask staff to make a note of them and to work with you to try to find a solution. And I suspect we're probably going to need to evaluate whether or not we need to examine a policy about cranes. This is a crane that the operator isn't inside the crane. It's a remote operated crane. There's lots of those in the community, some right across the street. So thank you for bringing it to us. I've got questions from two members of council, Councillor Hodge and Councillor Asmussen.
Yeah, I was just curious. You mentioned a bridge. But
Yeah,
maybe explain,
yeah.
what was it you wanted to
Well,
over the house? I just didn't understand what you meant by a bridge.
Effectively, if you built an arch, okay, I'm actually a professional engineer, but I don't do construction. I do manufacturing. But if for instance, this was the crane, and you built a bridge over top like this, it would actually have to be partly on my property. And I would have welcomed that from the very beginning. That was my suggestion to G&E.
Like a form of scaffold.
Over your house.
Because this thing's 66,000 pounds, right? If this thing collapses, there has to be at least something that's going to hold the jib in place. And hopefully, actually, it would collapse back the other way, the direction of the city, rather than towards me. So it'd have to be strong enough. It'd have to be high enough that if this fell, it didn't provide for an impact, you know, and break the bridge.
And is that done typically on projects involving cranes?
I'm not familiar. I'm not
It's
familiar
all new
with
to me.
it may be something that
I've never seen one. In fact, the suggestion you made about could the crane have been on the other property, then the crane could have collapsed, because they only collapse under load. They only collapse toward the load.
Right.
So in this case, it would collapse toward the project. The load could never be swung over your property. So I'm not certain that having it on the other side of the property is safer. It could actually collapse
a
toward
wind
the load.
collapse on a house.
Okay, and so I don't know the geometrics. We haven't measured it, but it does collapse always toward the load, and I don't know of anyone that's ever seen one collapse in the wind because they're allowed to float freely.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And I've got Councillor Asmussen.
Well, some of the questions were answered, and I guess the other thing, just to staff, just was the question about the 2-week delay in response back to Mr. Shore. I don't understand that. Did the developer come to you initially when they did the crane and ask for permission, or did they just...
No. They put up the crane, and I complained, and they put up the crane, and then I had to make complaint to the city.
Okay, I think we should note that when we forward people if they're going to be doing those, that we should be seeking that help first, or permission, I should say, first, before we start doing. Could have saved a lot of issues. And I remember back in February we talked about the blowout, the washout, and the issues. I do believe that's been corrected and fixed, though, hasn't it?
It depends what fix means. You know, there was something done, and it looks like there is now a ditch. It's not the way BFW originally set it up, which was a grassy swale. It's
Okay.
more like a ditch filled with gravel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Score.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned earlier that the fact is the mayor and Councillor Adamson was on site. Were they on site in here or somewhere else?
No, that was with a different issue. That
Different
was,
issue.
that was the issue that Councillor Asbitson was
So you didn't have a
just
chance to
speaking.
discuss this on safety with them? As far as
No,
the crane is
no, I
concerned?
didn't.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Just in the future, if we are trying to resolve this problem and any future problems, there is a British Columbia Association for Crane Safety established in 2005, so we should get in touch with them. I just found that, so there we go.
And it is one of the big issues on construction sites to maintain the safety of particularly elevated operations like that. So there's a lot of work that's been done in that regard. I thank you. I'm going to ask the staff get back to us related to any of the issues that you've raised, including the issue of the storm drain and the issue of the debris on Coast Meridian and et cetera. So we'll have more facts.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity to meet with Mr. Shore and talk about some of these issues. I haven't spoken with him myself, but I know my staff have. And we have been trying to work with a contractor to, either have an agreement with Mr. Shore or to prevent the crane from crossing the property. So, and some of the other issues, certainly would like to have the opportunity to meet with the Shores and to talk about those.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave these photos with you if anybody want to pass them around. Lou.
Just for council's knowledge, this is the amount of rebar that goes into the construction of a rectangular
Where's Maurice?
water rectangular. Way more rebar than a round one.
He's up there watching it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Item 3 is report of Deputy City Manager regarding the 2013 second trimester report. We have introductory comments by the Deputy City Manager.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, this is our second trimester report as noted. It's an ambitious work program for 2013, and we're making good progress on most all of the business plan priorities. There's a couple long-term studies where we would like things to go a little bit faster, but due to staff vacancies and other things are going a little slower than we anticipated, but overall good progress is being made. In terms of development, we're continuing to see active development in 2013, and if things continue as they have been, we expect that development levels will be consistent with last year at year end. From a budget perspective, our budget is trending towards being balanced or a small surplus. Our vacancies are down a little bit this year, so we're not going to have probably as big a surplus as we've had in previous years, but we are trending towards a balanced budget. And Michelle Hunt, I'd just like to acknowledge her, as she's the one that coordinates getting the information from all the departments to make this report possible. And she's also here today if council has any detailed questions, and with that, we'll just open things up to questions. Thank you.
Okay. Start with Councillor Asmussen, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate this report. It's quite informative, and it's from when Mayor Stewart and I first came on council, wanting to track information. The difficulty, Mr. Sikora, we come a long way in ability to track and monitor and being aware of how things are coming along. So I really appreciate staff's work on this. It's a good. The one thing I've already talked to communications about, it was when we get under B priorities, customer service, business improvements, we talk about key accomplishments. And I know we got the award, but I guess I want to have more communications to the business community and other communities about the improvements that we are making in there. I find at times that the business community and different communities aren't aware of the changes we're making, the streamlining process we're doing. So I think we need to promote this more and get it out there more. And so I just think we need to be better communicative, and I've spoken with the manager of communications, and she is going to be working on that, and I thank her for that. That's the one issue I also have on the vacancy positions. On the first two, information and technology, they're both this year, both at the beginning of the summer. Are we starting to come into another issue of the private industry paying more and going to have difficulty retaining some of these positions? I just want to know if this is going to be, we're starting to see a new trend again. We see this roll up and down over the years?
Through the chair, I don't think so. I think our pay rates are still reasonable and have been working with us, Justin, so they are helping. So unfortunately, we had two people find some driving offers.
Okay. But I do know a few years ago we were losing people to the private sector, and it does create difficulties within your division.
Yeah, we do keep an eye on market rate just to ensure that we're looking at it.
Okay, thank you. That's it?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. A couple things. Number one, I noticed that you're using the term increasing accountability. That's nice to hear. We're going to have a little more accountability and transparency. I don't know, where are you saying that this should happen? All departments or what's happening? It's all of a sudden
Thank you. Through the chair, I wouldn't characterize this as all of a sudden. Part of the purpose of the trimester report is to give council timely information in terms of how we're tracking in terms of carrying out the city's business. So the essence of it is to be accountable to council, who in turn is accountable to the taxpayers, and that's why we have gone to the effort of producing these reports now for council on a trimester basis.
Okay, and also on the mobile carts, I'm getting a lot of complaints over here on Glen at High Street. That cart sits there almost 24 hours a day, blocking off a couple parking spaces that are just the city's blocked off parking spaces, parking meters, or whatever it is for the mobile home unit, or that unit that sells hot dogs or whatever they're selling. And I wonder why we're, having them pick up a couple parking spaces when the businessmen on Glen are complaining that there's not enough parking.
Thank you.
And it's there from morning till late at night.
Through the chair, as council knows, we did decide to move into mobile vending in a limited way, and we do have some carts out there now. There's a couple up at Douglas College as well. I had not been aware of any complaints about the one on Glen, so I can certainly follow up with that. But part of that was selecting limited locations where these carts could go and allowing them to have that space to do their mobile vending. So I presume that we've probably allowed that individual to have the cart where it's at, but I'll follow up with staff and look into the nature of the complaint.
Yeah, I think it's important to maybe listen to the businessmen on High Street and Glen. The fact is that, and I'll tell you, I don't know what's happening in that area, but parking is horrendous in there. Go even in the evening at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, there's no parking in Glen. Nowhere, on either side of the street. What's happening? That we didn't allow enough parking in those units that are being built there. So people are overflowing on the streets, as they are in all parts of our city. And I don't know whether we are in time to catch this and maybe revert it to some common sense, or we're going to continue on this vein and have all these horrendous problems and have more problems on parking. And it doesn't matter where you go. The other day I talked to a lady, a retired school teacher from Fairview, and she's screaming, she says, since when did all this traffic be able to park in front of our homes and no parking in our area? So I'm just wondering, what are we doing as far as parking is concerned also? So I just thought I'd mention that. But anyways, in the surplus, we had, let's see, vacancies. The vacancies, we had 53 or something in vacancies, and then it said the 53 vacancies, which represents 6.4% vacancy rate, which 34% backfilled at that time. What do you mean at that time? Give me some time frame or whatever. What is
This starts with for the end of August.
Yeah, at the end of August. Okay, so there's still then 20. So for the full year, there's still then 20 or 13 odd positions that are vacant, right?
That's correct. I guess there's a couple comments there. We do take that report at a point in time. So in this particular case, it was August 31st, and there's basically 19 positions vacant because there was 53, but 34 are backfilled. That's a little higher than what the number was actually lower in the first trimester. So in terms of our turnover, we did an allowance in our budget this year. That's what's squeezing us down to be close to a balanced budget. We have a $800,000 turnover allowance. In addition to that, the other change from previous years is we generally have about a 10% vacancy rate in terms of RCMP officers. And this year there happens to be more officers available, I guess, from Depot. And so the vacancy rate in our detachment is lower than anticipated. And those two things are why we think we're going to end up with a small surplus this year.
So these 19 positions that have been vacant, okay? You have 19 positions vacant whole year round.
They're not necessarily, that's just a point in time when they happen to be vacant. That doesn't mean they're vacant for the entire year. Some of those positions could have been filled a week after we produced that report. It doesn't necessarily mean they're vacant for the whole year.
So I'm trying to get a handle on this, on this wording that you used. To me, I can't make any sense out of it, the way you're addressing it. Because, number one, you said at the end of August, something was filled, 34 positions, or 34 positions have been filled. So that left 13 vacant spaces, and now you say there's 19. So that 13 positions must have been whole year round. Am I correct there? Yep. What's happened with the 13 positions? They weren't filled before August and not filled after August. Am I correct?
No. We take the report as of August 31st because that's the end of the second trimester. At that time, it's just basically a record of where we're at on that particular day. As the report notes, there was, I just have to go back and check here, but there's, I believe, 53 vacancies and 34 were backfilled, so there was 19 that weren't backfilled at that time. But that's just as of August 31st. That's not saying that those positions aren't filled now.
Well, are they filled so I can be able to read this? If the positions are filled now, I should be able to look at this and catch it, that it's been filled.
But
if it's not filled, I want to know how many vacancies there is.
But there are other vacancies that have come up. Someone could have taken leave or retired on.
You know what, Mayor, I realize that. Don't try and spin it, okay? I don't want any spinning. You know what I mean? No, don't spin it. Just I want to know how many vacancies. You can shake your head, Adamson, as much as you want.
I'm not shaking my head, Mr.
You know what?
Sikora.
I want to know. All I want to know
is
how many.
Throw insults at other people.
Councillor Sikora has.
I got the floor. You shut your buddy up, okay?
Oh, excuse me.
Councillor Sikora, I'm going to have to ask you to please.
Okay.
Be in line.
So anyways, how many positions has there been left in the city as of today? How many vacancies there that haven't been filled for a full year?
Through the chair, I don't have a current report as of today. The report before council is as of August 31st, and as I said, that's a snapshot of where we were at on August 31st. But we will have filled a bunch of positions since then, and there will be a bunch more that will have come vacant as well. It continually changes.
So Dan, I notice you use the same expenditure surplus of approximately 450,000 result of members vacancy that's in your SSV, which will help offset the 800,000 vacancy allowance in 2013 budget. So actually, in every year there has been vacancies in staff, and there's been a pretty good surplus. But there's never ever said to me that this year there's a $2 million surplus because of the positions haven't filled. There's been 800,000, 600,000, or anything else. It's never been brought up, and that's my concern. But all of a sudden, certain times the figures appear to be a certain way, and the next time they appear to be a certain other way. You can check the record on the previous years, and that's exactly what's been happening with our vacancy there. I was told, pardon me, I was told that there was the surplus, or the surplus is very, very, very minor, minute, So anyways, I guess we'll have another discussion on Wednesday as far as this report is concerned. And also at the same time, I noticed all of a sudden the council members are shareholders of QNet. How can I be taken off that shareholder? That I'm not a shareholder of QNet. It's the taxpayers that are shareholders.
Well,
Okay.
you paid your taxes, Councillor Sikora.
Pardon?
I guess. Mr. Dumont.
Just for the record, the language around the vacancies we have and the backfilling, that's the standard language that we use in our trimester report, and I believe the report is consistent with the reports we give each trimester as well.
Okay, I had a couple more questions, but I'll be asking them on Wednesday.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks. It was great getting this report because one of the reasons it reminded me of all the work that the staff and council has done. The half year or something. Oh yeah, we did that. It was a big thing. Anyway, some good stuff. An excellent report. And there was a point in here that reminded me of something I wanted to bring to staff's attention. Attachment A, page 6 of 16. Functional transportation plan for Victoria, Coast Meridian to Cedar, and Coast Meridian David Harper, and on the previous page the Pardon Creek neighborhood plan being finalized. All that stuff where a lot of work has already been done. What I wanted just to, I thought this would be a good time to bring this up is that as all of this work was happening, positions of our neighboring municipalities are always changing, it seems to me, regarding the degree of cooperation or the degree of alignment that their transportation plans have with our transportation plans. And I want to know to what extent that we are working on trying to make sure that, especially for Partington Creek, where we're going to have a very dense population in there, that we're quite satisfied that our plans, which are currently more east-west than north-south, that are still the right ones, given any changes that we may have seen in our neighboring municipalities. I don't know who would answer that, or maybe it's a question that's put out there to make sure that staff is aware of this, and I'm concerned about it.
I mean, so are we, and we are constantly, trying to keep our antennas up with respect to what our neighbors' positions are. That's one of the reasons why all three communities agreed to set up a committee, which Brent is our member on, and I think they just had, or just going to have their inaugural meeting tomorrow.
Oh,
and so this is a very timely. So there's a committee set up to discuss these kind of things. Brent is our contact, and that is our recent formal attempt to sort of like align discussions, give a forum to have all these kind of discussions. Having said that, every community takes positions from time to time. They do change from time to time, but I think our plans are robust and are pretty good. But we're always on the lookout for potential future problems with our neighbors.
Is the agenda of that new committee public, or is it in camera meeting, or is it a public meeting?
I'm not sure of that question right now. It's an order. I've got an agenda for it. It's in my phone or my email, so I don't have it readily available. But it's just for the three cities with the three reps and staff to get together and basically going over the first structure of how we're going to move forward.
One of the very first items on the agenda is scope of the committee in terms of reference
That's
to
right.
the committee, and there has been some changing positions on that too by some of the other
Yes,
members. Initially, it was going to be a more wide-ranging committee, and now at least one of the other members wants to sort of zero in more just on transit issues and not have the roads thing. The roads thing, I think, is also important. So one of the very first items that you should discuss is agenda, scope of this committee. I think we'll get regular briefings back on those discussions. In addition to that committee, we, from time to time, discuss these issues of the tri-city mayor and managers meetings. But this is an outgrowth of those kind of discussions, and this is the more appropriate place to have those kind of in-depth discussions.
Councillor Sikora talked about parking problems, and these sorts of transportation problems, whether it's public transit or the roads and the connections and all, it's just potholes or paving, these things are always top of mind for everybody who's paying our wages and wanting the city to run well. So I think it's important. I'd actually forgotten about that committee. I hadn't heard about it in several months, so that's
Well,
great.
something I've been raising for years
Yeah,
to
I know.
get
So
this
I'm really
staff.
happy that's proceeding, and I can talk to you offline
Yeah.
about one particular thing that I'm aware of that's sort of related
Okay.
to this. So this was a great springboard to talk about that, this report, so thank you.
Okay, well, I've got a couple. Speaking specifically to the vacancy report attachment E, which Councilor Secor referred to, is it possible to get to add another column for future reports that is specifically whether it's vacant, backfilled, or new position, and separate that out from the recruitment status? Because the recruitment status column is perhaps adding to the confusion. It competition design, posting, advertising, 80-day trial period, job evaluation, and I'm not certain that the public gets a good impression of what those mean. So having separated off the backfill vacant column, could we have a little bit of an explanation at the bottom to let the public know what, say, competition design means, or what job evaluation means? Does that mean that it's a 3-month process and that sort of thing? So they'll understand better what we're doing. Might be helpful. Okay, anybody else? With great thanks of all of council. Much appreciation.
Thanks.
Councilor O'Neill, Councilor Nicholson, all in favor, opposed, carried unanimously. Well done. One item added, and then one item added after I moved on to the next item. So we'll start with the item that's added on.
The first under business item is Sunday construction. That was brought up by Councillor Askinson.
Yes, I raised this at the last meeting about noise and construction going on Sundays by our house and the bylaws coming by. The response from staff, and I think most of council has seen it, is that we don't actually stop construction. We just regulate the noise on construction. But the issue, and I think Craig can relate to this, is you want one day where there's no big vehicles parked in your road, blocking the ways. You just want one day where there's nothing going on, period. Because you spend 6 days, 7 a.m. till whatever time, with people doing construction around your home. And what I'm asking for is that staff look at amending the bylaw to ban construction works completely on a Sunday. And because that's a gap right now, we do not completely ban construction on Sundays. And to take a look at that, come back to council with that, with whether that's possible or not. Because I do think people deserve one day of notice. I mean, whether somebody is outside working, they're still making noise. If they're inside, they've got vehicles parked in the street, they're coming and going. It's just in a neighborhood when you deal with this on a regular basis, like I have for the last 4 years. And we've had a couple complaints about this from emails from other people. And
Yeah, I just stopped right there. Did you ask for Heather?
I asked for Stephanie.
Okay. Why don't we put this on hold until we get the appropriate staff person in the room, and we can move on to
How did you know?
I saw you text. I saw you emailing somebody. Is that okay? If we can move to Councillor Reid's item.
Yes, I want to talk about the budget meeting that we had with our business folks and some residential folks last week. And in it, one of the things that was brought up was the fact that we should have a meeting set up, and I think we have to be very careful how we do the meeting. I think it should be specifically for the business folks, although our residents are welcome to attend if they want. But I would also like to have, and I spoke to Ms. McLeod about this in the hallway the other day, women thinking, which can get us all into a lot of trouble. But what I wanted to do was because I think that a lot of our small business owners are people that are new to the country to start with. And I think that they learn the laws as they trip across them as they're trying to open their businesses. And I think it would be very useful if we sort of had a course in Taxes 101 and how we come to the amount that we need to raise every year and how that is dispersed amongst the different categories and how indeed the assessment works, that the province does it and how that happens. And We have enough talent around City Hall and on council that I think we could put a very basic Business 101 course on taxes, with the end result being some really good progressive ideas on how we can better look and do business taxes. And that is also going to require the UBCM to help us and the province to help us. But when I look and see the businesses that are around, that really are the bread and butter of our community, the little bubble tea shops and the nail salons and all the things that populate our downtown core, they can't be paying the taxes, that the real estate taxes that are going to come with being next to a SkyTrain. It just wouldn't be, it just doesn't make any sense. And so I think we have to have a way which we can help, we can encourage, and we have an economic development department. We're bringing on a new tourism person. I think we've got the basics that we need, and of course we have our wonderful Sheena McLeod, and I think we can really move forward on this. So I would like to know if everyone else is as interested in doing this.
Well,
as I am.
I'll let council know. You recall during the budget
Yes.
consultation meeting, I made a commitment to business on behalf of council that we would call such a meeting. We have since then spoken to the Chamber of Commerce, to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and to staff about the possibility of what process we would use to set that up. And so it's in progress now. I'm looking around. I don't see David here, but
Yeah, well, you know, unfortunately, I guess I'm not a member of the right group. I didn't know that. So.
Well, as you recall, I made a commitment to council to set that up, and as soon as it gets set up, council will be told.
Okay, well, before council gets told what we're doing, I think maybe council would like to have some input into what I think that we should be trying, what knowledge I think, and we all think, that we should be imparting to those folks, and the simplicity of the knowledge that we're going to have to start. Doing taxes is you know, it's easy once you're in the forest and you've done it, like me, for 20 years, but for someone coming into a new country, opening up a business, this is a complicated matter, and we need to be very basic with it. So I personally want some input into this.
Absolutely.
And I don't know about everybody else, but
Absolutely.
I do.
No, it sounds entirely appropriate. I'll tell you that the input we got, for example, the comment from a couple of the businesses of the Chamber of Commerce was that no one would come into a community and set up without knowing what the taxes would be. And yet they had heard from some of these folks that they were surprised by the taxes. So I agree that how taxes get calculated is an important element to that. One of the speakers, we've seen him before, actually was quite astounded by the way in which his own purchase affected the resulting taxes that he ended up having to pay, and for that matter, that other people on High Street ended up having to pay. So, and I don't know how to reach them before they buy their business, because we quite often see them showing up at the permits counter after they've made investment decisions. So I agree, though, that there's got to be some outreach to make sure that people understand that. The other commitment, though, was for a meeting where they would also be able to give input into all kinds of that realm of challenge. And thirdly, of course, the one you just raised was the UBCM, and how do we get it so that, and I predicted to all of those business people that the next 2 years they will see enormous increases in their taxes, because enormous increases in their property assessment because of the speculation over the arrival of SkyTrain. They won't get the traffic from SkyTrain yet, so they will have to pay higher taxes long before the traffic arrives to make their businesses, in many cases, viable. So it is a challenge that Richmond faced with and in fact, Richmond ended up having to get an order in council to relieve the tax pressure on some of their businesses because they were designated residential. They were a single-story, say, dry cleaner on a residential property that went from $750,000 to $750 million in overnight because SkyTrain arrived, and they couldn't run their business anymore, and they couldn't rezone because the city wasn't ready for it. So it's big challenges.
And Your Worship, just speaking about that for a moment, I think we need to be progressive and proactive on this, because we need to be talking to the assessment authority long before we get to where Richmond got to, because there's actually no reason that we should be having to go there. That they should, we should be looking at closer to dates when we rezone and things like that. But there's a lot of it. It's complicated, and I'm willing to work on this one. This is a biggie for me.
Councillor Hodge.
I think it would also be interesting to just have somebody even from the assessment authority attend, or some information, because so much of this is based on the assessment stuff that's out of our control. It's interesting to note that I know there are provisions for residential if you're in an area that's seeing a lot of growth and changing to multi-family from single, that there are provisions to freeze your assessment at its current land use. I don't know if that applies in business. I know there were some things that were done in Richmond to try to sort of work with business owners, but I don't think they have the same options that residents have. But it would be interesting to know what options we may have as a council, and certainly I think it would be beneficial for them to hear directly from BC Assessment, because I think that was a lot of their concerns would be best addressed by that authority.
Yeah, absolutely. This was maybe 3 years ago when that original business, Urban Gate, he was very public about it, ended up meeting with Mr. Jackson from the tax department, and a full discussion about assessments, BC Assessment Authority, independent, arm's length, all of those things. And I think most of the businesses really appreciated that deeper understanding. That doesn't make it easier on a business that's facing a 30 or 40% tax increase because of the assessment.
But we're just part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when the check gets written, it's written to us, so we're the ones that hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and can I just
Councillor
comment?
Asmus.
That's a good point, Craig, because when with the ratepayers, we set up almost every year now. BC Assessment comes in, explains how you appeal, and I think part of the problem is a bunch of those people didn't know how, business people don't know how, or the residents who didn't know how to appeal didn't know the process. And it makes it great, and that's something you could do on an ongoing basis, I think, because with new businesses coming in there, help them with it. So not just a 1 year, maybe an ongoing, every couple of years to revisit this issue.
And that raises one final issue that we haven't yet dealt with, because there's one, I'll call him landlord of questionable scruples, who didn't tell his tenants that the property values had gone up, because the assessment goes to the owner of the property, not to the tenant, even if the tenant is responsible for paying the taxes. And in this case, the property values have gone up by 50-something% because of actions by the owner. The owner was perfectly happy, I gather, with that, because he continues to sell strata units in the project. And the tenants in the project are stuck now in June getting handed a tax bill saying, well, where do I appeal the assessment? The assessment appeal limit was back in January, and they're left with no recourse whatsoever, and 2 weeks to come up with a check. And I won't tell the rest of that story because of its whether the check got passed on to us, but massive issues. Okay.
That was my little issue.
Thank you very much.
Big issue.
And it's a big issue. Very good. Thank you. Now we'll go back to Councillor Rasmussen. You might as well start again. We've got our staff working in the room.
Okay, I'm informed. So the issue is construction on Sundays, and the bylaw only deals with noise at the present, but people that live around construction, it's just not the noise, it's the impact of the vehicles, the people on the roads and everything in and out. And I says, Craig knows this. So when I realized, I always thought, maybe Craig's thought the same thing, that there was no construction by our bylaw. And when I got the latest update, it's just dealt with noise. So my wish would be to, I think, go to what we thought it was and fix the loophole to not allow for construction works to happen on a Sunday. And so that's my, if council supports, just through the staff.
Sure.
Is there any comment on that?
I think I can make a general comment. I think we could do that. There is a lot of construction that I think takes place on Sunday, though, so I think that would be a sensitive issue for the industry itself. But if that's the wish of council, we can move in that direction.
Sure. Yeah, I think this would more properly come forward, the suggestion as a notice of motion, council, because I think it's.
No.
I mean, it's not just fixing a loophole. This is a very major change in the way we allow businesses to operate. So I think it needs to be discussed quite a bit, and whether or not the council agrees with it, there needs to be a formal vote on it. we need time to research it as well, to give us a notice of motion. I wouldn't want to see, just going forward, staff like this when if something's allowed now and we're going to totally ban it, that's more than fixing a loophole.
Okay. I have similar reservations about it because it isn't so much a loophole. The reality is we allow construction, and for many people, homeowners, for example, Sunday may be the only day they can build a fence or whatever, and could then have an exemption.
Well, my issue was under new home construction, not on people's personal repairs of properties.
Okay. I understand, but there's all kinds of new home construction that's the owner building his own home or the owner building his own renovation. I'm not sure. So in any case, I think it's a little more complex, but I'd want council to be able to weigh in on whether we're directing staff to go through and prepare a report or not. Maybe it's not an issue for the majority of council, but I think it's worth having a conversation about it. So Councillor Hodge, Councillor Support, Councillor Booth.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. I'd certainly like to know more because, like Council, I was under the impression we didn't have something. That may have been an old, bylaw from years ago. And then there's other people that think that it's a free-for-all on a Sunday and they're out there doing roofing. So certainly I'd like to, just as a councillor, know what the current regulations are, what other communities do. So because once again, I'm really moving towards on this whole construction issue, and I'm going to be slightly off topic, but I really want to know and see what we can do to try and coordinate some of our rules and regulations with our neighbors. So the last thing I want to do is get out of sync with everybody else, but I'd also like to know what everybody else is doing. And what we can do, I think the big issue is the noise. I recognize that some of the work takes place inside, but on a summer day, the windows are open, the cars are everywhere, so it does impact. But it's more of an impact where we have existing homes, and it's that one house being built in the middle of an existing neighborhood, and some of us, like Councillor Asman, have lived through this for 10 years, and we have it going on in existing neighborhood. You get a subdivision where there's 50 homes, and they're starting at home 1 and working their way to home 50. It's maybe not as big of an impact, but it's certainly the Sunday construction does have an impact on our residents, but also it has an impact on building trades and scheduling and a whole lot of other issues. So I think we're getting into a big issue. I don't think we need to go and notice a motion, but I'd certainly like to see just an update from staff as to where we are, where everybody else is going, and how many complaints we've received, and just sort of get an idea of how big the problem is and where we can go, whether it's a total ban or whether we just need to sort of fine-tune it. I'd certainly like to have that discussion.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I think we're opening up the biggest can of worms we've ever opened in our life. We really are. And we're going to put the staff through the ringer that we don't have to. And then we're screaming about our budgets. We're screaming the spending the money and a few other things, but yet we're loading the staff up to somehow go on some kind of a wild goose chase. Council O'Neill is correct. The fact is, let's say I'm a homeowner and I want to put up my own fence. The only day off I have is a Sunday. So I want to put up my fence on a Sunday. I want to upgrade my hot tub. I want to whatever it may be, or put a shed for the machine that services the hot tub and that. Is that you know what? How far are we going to go? And then instead of having all the bylaw enforcement officers working during the week, they get the rest of the week off, but they work all on Sundays. Now chasing up and down the street. I mean, this is just a little far-fetched. That's all there's to it.
Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you. I think it's clear that a pretty wide-ranging report is what we need. It is an issue. It's an issue to a whole lot of our residents. But I think there's room for considering the homeowner who wants to do his own work on Sunday. I don't see a problem with that. It's not that frequent, but there are so many. Each one of us who speaks can come up with a different consideration. We should exempt this, we should exempt that, work inside, work outside. That's as I whispered to the mayor a moment ago, jackhammer your patio on Sunday.
Versus painting.
Yeah. And staff are much better than we are at thinking of all the possibilities and the possible results of decisions that we might sometimes choose to make hastily. It's clearly a case where we'd like staff to go away and think about it, think hard about it, look at what all the neighbors are doing, try and come up, maybe we can be a model for our neighborhood. Joining communities. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd rather just pick one that's really working really well.
Yeah, but somebody may already be doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else?
That's done.
So we just.
What did you take from that?
I would like a motion of
There you go.
council. If you would like to report, I would like a motion because there has been some confusion in the staff.
That's why I asked.
There's these comments that get made, and if there's a motion, then we can sort of find it, we can prioritize it, put it on a list, but I would like a motion.
May is ready to make one.
Oh, well,
Oh,
Well,
that's
probably
correct.
shouldn't Councillor Asmus. It's the motion, he raised the issue.
Well, I'd like to have, give direction to staff through a motion to look into other cities, what they're doing for construction on Sundays. And as you've heard around the table, the varying degrees of whether it's new home construction or people in their backyards. And to come, because I do believe it's, as
No,
Councilor
you don't
Nichols-
need to rationalize it.
No,
You just
okay.
have to.
And so have them come back with a report on the best practices that have been used and what we can do. Does that make?
Okay, so it's to prepare a report examining issues like infill versus greenfield, resident versus new home construction, that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
and neighboring communities.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the common sense.
Are we comfortable with that? So this is not a high
Second.
priority. This would be not, this
Yeah.
would be not a high priority, since,
Put it on the
as time permits.
Time
Everyone
permits.
comfortable with that?
Well,
time
and
permits.
at some point, it comes to us on a list, and we might decide to change it to priority.
Exactly.
For the moment, we
But it
just
ends
want to
up
get
on a
it on the
list,
list.
and we've got to, because we do this sometimes, and I recognize, and the reason I asked Mr. Stevlin was because he quite often asks, now, we're not sure what we took from this, whether it was instruction by council or instruction by several council members or what. So this is a better way of doing it. I appreciate it very much. That was a motion.
Yep.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor
Good
Hodge.
try.
Any further discussion, Councillor O'Neill?
So that's why I wanted, when I said a notice of motion or something, I wanted some clarity on what we were doing, not just Brent and a couple of guys going, oh yeah, that'd be a good idea, asking staff to kind of look into stuff. So Pete brought it to a point. I will support the motion, staff to look into this, because I do believe it is an issue, and I also support the fact that it's, agree that it's not the highest priority out there. But yeah, let's find out what the best practices are out there, and so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look into this, but we got a lot more really important stuff that's the A priority now as we just looked at the A and B's and C's, and this certainly shouldn't displace some of those very important things we have to move forward.
Okay, now, procedurally, recognizing we only asked for staff report and not for staff action, I waived a procedure, but if anyone objects to waiving the procedure bylaw that doesn't allow the motion because it wasn't on the agenda. Anyone object to that?
No.
Very good. The motion is on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Did you want a motion to waive?
No?
No, you're good. Okay.
Every now and then,
It'll go forward to council.
so we come to council?
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, thank
Every
you.
now and then,
Yeah,
Ms.
here comes
Moore
council. Right.
smirks.
No. Simply smiling.
It's a means of moving it forward. And motion carries unanimously.
Yeah.
Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Nicholson, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
So the,
Have